We see a slow shot of a backyard lawn at dawn. Dew glistens on short grass. The camera moves closer, and we notice clusters of wide-ribbed leaves hugging the ground. You've seen this plant. You might have stepped on it today. It's called plantain, not the banana-like fruit, but the low, broadleaf weed. Plantago major, to modern eyes, it's just a nuisance. To older generations, it was a survival ally. In old villages across Europe and Asia, plantain grew along roads, in compacted soil, near homes, and in fields. People didn't plant it, it just appeared. The elders called it the traveler's footstep because it grew wherever humans walked, almost like it was following us. During times of war and scarcity, when crops failed or fields were burned, people turned to whatever green life remained. Plantain leaves became one of those quiet heroes. The young leaves were picked, washed, and boiled like spinach. They're rich in vitamin A, vitamin C, and minerals that help support the immune system and basic strength. The seeds, tiny and often ignored, are related to psyllium, the same kind of fiber that supports digestion and keeps the gut moving. Imagine a cold spring during a famine. No market, no stored wheat left. Just a family walking along a dirt road, scanning the ground for something, anything, edible. They see plantain. Not one plant, but hundreds, lining the path. The older generation knows. We can eat this. They gather basket after basket of leaves, boiling them with a little salt or whatever they had. Staying alive thanks to what everyone else would have called weeds. Plantain also became a simple, traditional first aid plant. For generations, people would crush the leaves and place them on small cuts or insect bites. Not as a miracle cure, but as a humble, soothing support from the garden. Now, of course, we have to say this clearly. This video is for educational purposes only. It is not medical advice, and we are not telling you to treat yourself with wild plants. Always consult a qualified health professional before using any plant, especially if you have health conditions or take medication. But here's the strange part. Today, plantain still grows everywhere. Yet most people have no idea that in hard times, it helped people get a little more nutrition into their bodies. It doesn't fit the image of polished, packaged food. It doesn't have a label. It doesn't pay anyone advertising money, so we mowed it, sprayed it, and forgot it. If someone today wanted a constant, quiet food source, they could let plantain grow in a corner of their yard, harvesting young leaves for soups, stews, or simple sautéed greens. No complicated technique, just respect and knowledge. We walk past this free food every day, but plantain is just the doorway. Because deeper in the wild field, another forgotten survivor waits. A plant that turns sting into strength. We step off the mowed lawn and move into an overgrown edge of a forest. The light softens. The buzzing of insects grows louder. Hands part tall grass, revealing dark green serrated leaves with tiny hairs. This is stinging nettle, Urtica dioica. Most people know it only as that annoying plant that makes your skin burn and itch if you brush against it. But what if we told you that, for centuries, nettle was one of the most valuable survival foods in cold climates? In the early days of spring, when winter storage was empty and fields were still bare, people had a dangerous gap. Weeks where there was almost no fresh food. The body craved something green. Something alive. That's when nettle appeared. The young shoots pushed through the damp soil, their sting a warning. But also a sign, I'm full of life. Boiled or steamed, nettle loses its sting. And what's left is a deep green vegetable that's packed with iron, calcium, vitamin A, and vitamin K nutrients that help support healthy blood, bones, and general vitality. Many traditional cultures used nettle soup as a way to wake up the body after a long, harsh winter. There's an old story told in a tiny village at the edge of a northern forest. When a late frost destroyed their early crops, people feared the worst. But an elder woman, with long gray hair and hands stained green from herbs, led the children into the woods. She showed them the nettles, taught them how to harvest them with cloth-wrapped hands, and how to cook them into a thick soup. The children complained about the taste at first, until they realized that this poor man's food was the reason they weren't going to bed hungry. Nettle wasn't just food. In some places, fibers from the stems were used to make ropes and cloth during shortages. One plant, feeding, clothing, and supporting entire communities. So why, today, is nettle mostly seen as an enemy of hikers and gardeners? It's simple. It doesn't fit into our neat rows of cultivated crops. It's not easily controlled. It's wild, prolific. And not very marketable, modern agriculture chose other plants that are easier to ship, store, and sell. Once again, the knowledge shrank. Nettle went from village savior to weed to avoid. If someone wanted to reconnect with this knowledge today, they could grow nettle in a controlled corner of their garden, harvest the young tops, and cook them like any leafy green. But again, always learn from local experts, check your identification carefully, and talk to a health professional before trying new wild foods, because nettle can empower you, but misunderstanding any wild plant can be risky. We leave the forest edge now. The light grows warmer as if we're walking backwards in time. Ahead, we see something else, an old stone wall. And beside it, a humble plant that once stood between life and scurvy. What could possibly hide in those small yellow flowers? The scene shifts to a coastal cliff path or a rocky hillside. Wind whistles, waves crash below. Close-ups reveal clusters of bright yellow flowers and jagged leaves pushing out of cracks in the stones. Meet the quiet, stubborn survivor, Dandelion Taraxacum officinale. To modern eyes, dandelions are just those annoying things ruining a perfect lawn. But to older generations in many parts of the world, dandelions were an essential food and tonic. Every part of this plant has a story. The leaves are rich in vitamin A, vitamin C, and minerals like potassium. They were traditionally eaten in spring salads or lightly cooked, giving the body a gentle push after months of heavy, preserved foods. The roots were often dried and roasted as a coffee substitute, and in some old households a jar of chopped roots in a dark cupboard wasn't strange at all. It was normal life. There's a tale from a time of economic collapse, when a coastal town had almost nothing but fish and a few root vegetables. Fresh greens were rare. Children's gums started bleeding, a classic sign of vitamin deficiency. An old fisherman's wife, remembering her grandmother's stories, led the children into the hillsides and showed them dandelion leaves. They gathered them by the basket, mixing them into soups and broths. Slowly, people's strength returned. Was it magic? No, just simple vitamins that human bodies desperately needed. Dandelion also became known in folk tradition as a gentle liver-supporting plant. Old herbal manuscripts mention dandelion as something that wakes up digestion, helping the body deal with heavy foods. Today, some people still drink dandelion root tea as a coffee alternative, appreciating its earthy bitterness. Once again, here's our reminder. This is not a replacement for medical advice, and we're not promising any cures. Everything you hear in this video is for learning and curiosity. Always consult a professional before using any plant in a serious way. So why did a kitchen staple turn into a lawn enemy? As manicured lawns and ornamental gardening became a status symbol, dandelions became an opponent of perfection. Instead of food, they were labeled broadleaf weeds. An entire generation grew up thinking that a yard full of dandelions was ugly, instead of a sign of free, abundant, nutritious food. Think about that for a second. A free salad bar sprayed, poisoned, and removed because it didn't fit an image. If someone today chose to see dandelions differently, they could allow a patch to grow, harvest young leaves before they turn too bitter, and experiment with simple teas or cooked greens. No complicated equipment, just a small shift in perception. But dandelion is still relatively familiar, at least in name. Our next plant is different. It hides closer to the water, and once turned stagnant puddles into life-saving hydration. We walk along the edge of a quiet stream at sunset. Dragonflies skim the surface. The camera moves down to reveal tall, jointed green stalks, almost like small bamboo, rising from the wet soil. This is horsetail, Equisetum arvens, an ancient plant, older than the dinosaurs, sometimes called a living fossil. Horsetail doesn't look like something you'd eat, and in many cases, you wouldn't treat it as a common vegetable. But in traditional survival situations, especially in parts of Europe and Asia, horsetail was used in a different way, as a mineral-rich tea. The stems store silica and minerals that help support bones, hair, nails, and the body's general structure. When people boiled it gently in water, it created a simple, earthy drink. Not a miracle potion, but a quiet replenishing brew after long periods of physical strain. There's a lesser-known story from an army encampment long ago. Soldiers exhausted, their water often muddy or suspect. An old scout showed them horsetail growing near cleaner springs. He told them, "Boil this in your pot. Drink it slowly." It wasn't about flavor, it was about surviving another day. Keeping joints moving, bodies strong enough to march. In some folk traditions, horsetail was also used externally in washes or compresses. Again, not as a guaranteed cure, but as a supportive plant in a world with very few options. Today, horsetail is rarely recognized by most people. If anything, it's seen as a stubborn plant that invades gardens. And yet traditional herbalists still respect it, cautiously, for its strength and its mineral content. But we must be very clear here, horsetail is not a casualty for everyone, and it must be used with knowledge and care. It can interact with certain conditions and medications. So once again, never self-medicate based only on a video. Talk to a qualified professional before trying plants like horsetail. Why does knowledge like this disappear? Part of the answer is simple. Modern life moved us away from streams, forests, and wild edges. We traded walking paths for concrete. We traded foraging for shopping. And over time, this quiet category of survival plants slipped out of our everyday awareness. But there's something else. These plants can be grown or found by almost anyone, almost anywhere. They don't depend on global supply chains. They don't require fancy packaging. They're difficult to brand, difficult to own, difficult to control. And when something is free, abundant, and powerful in a simple way, it often gets described as old-fashioned, unscientific, or simply irrelevant. We follow the stream now, and deeper into the landscape. The water widens, forming a small, still pond. In the shallows, a different kind of survivor waits, one that turned mud into strength. The camera glides over a misty pond at dawn. The surface is still, reflecting the pale sky. Beneath the water, thick rhizomes stretch out like buried treasure. A single elegant flower rises above the surface, lotus. But we're not here for the flower. We're here for the lotus root, Nelumbo nucifera. In many parts of Asia, lotus root has been a traditional food for centuries. It grows in ponds and lakes, its long, spongy roots forming pale, patterned slices when cut. In times of shortage, when fields were flooded or when land crops failed, communities turned to the water. Lotus root became a dense, reliable source of energy. Cooked in soups, stir-fries, or stews, lotus root provides carbohydrates for fuel, plus fiber and minerals to support digestion and basic body function. The crisp texture and mild flavor made it easy to combine with whatever else was available. Legends tell of wandering monks, surviving long journeys by digging lotus roots from the edges of temple ponds. Families near rivers dug carefully in the muddy water, finding the roots with bare hands, their arms numb from the cold, knowing that each section they pulled up meant another meal. While lotus root is still known in certain cuisines, many people around the world have never even heard of it. To them, it's just a beautiful symbol on artwork or a rare ingredient in specialty dishes. It's a prime example of how certain foods stay strong in one culture, but vanish from the global story. When we talk about food security, we rarely talk about these humble roots. We talk about massive fields of a single crop relying on trucks and fuel and long, fragile chains. Lotus root belongs to a different world. A world where humans work with ponds, mud, and seasons, not just factories. But what if you don't live near ponds or forests? Is all of this just romantic nostalgia? Not necessarily. Because there's one more secret we need to talk about. Not a single plant, but a forgotten way of growing food. A quiet technique that can turn a small space into a slow, steady fountain of nourishment. We shift to a small, humble backyard or village garden. The soil is dark and uneven, dotted with rocks. The camera pans over a messy mixture of herbs, vegetables, and flowers growing together, seemingly without order. But there is a pattern. For our final secret, we're not focusing on one plant, but on an ancient garden style, the perennial survival patch. Before neat rows and perfect lawns, many families kept what we might now call a chaos garden, a mix of plants that did one simple thing. They came back year after year with little input. People planted once, maybe twice, and then let nature weave the rest. What did they grow? It varied by region, but a typical survival patch could include things like perennial onions and garlic, which regrow and split each year, offering a steady supply of flavor and mild health support. Berry bushes like elderberries or blackberries, which provide vitamins and energy when in season. Perennial greens such as sorrel or good King Henry, offering tangy, nutrient-rich leaves without needing to replant. Wild or semi-wild herbs that support basic digestion and well-being. These gardens were not about perfection. They were about resilience. When annual crops failed, people could still walk into this tangle of life and find something edible. A handful of berries, a clump of onions, a patch of greens. They didn't necessarily see it as special or alternative. It was just how you survived. Over time, as agriculture industrialized, the idea of a messy survival patch was replaced by straight rows, monoculture, and lawns. Perennial food plants became background decoration, while annuals took center stage. But if you look closely at old stories and diaries, you see hints. Families who always had something to eat, because behind the house there was a small jungle of useful plants. A hidden insurance policy grown directly in the ground. Today, anyone with a little bit of space, even a corner of a yard or a shared plot, can start their own version of this. Plant a few perennial edibles. Add a useful herb or two. Let a so-called weed-like plantain occupy a corner. Over time, the garden starts giving back with minimal effort. Of course, local climate, soil, and regulations matter. And just as always, research carefully, identify plants properly, and talk to knowledgeable locals or professionals before eating anything you're not sure about. Safety first. Curiosity second. Both are necessary. But behind all the details, one thing becomes clear. We have been trained to forget that food can be patient, quiet, and right under our feet. Music softens, becoming reflective. So, what have we opened tonight? We met plantain, the weed that followed our footsteps and fed families when fields were empty. We walked through nettle patches, where a painful sting hid a powerhouse of minerals and strength. We bent down to greet dandelions, once a spring tonic and salad staple, now sprayed out of existence in the name of perfect lawns. We touched the ancient horsetail, a living fossil storing minerals in its slender stems. We dove into the mud to find lotus root, a quiet energy source in times when land crops failed. And we stepped into the idea of the perennial survival patch, where planting once can mean harvesting, in small ways, almost forever. None of these plants are miracles. They're not magic bullets. They don't guarantee eternal health or protection from disease. But they remind us of something we rarely hear, that our ancestors survived not just because of big fields and big systems, but because they knew the names, tastes, and uses of humble plants around them. We've lost much of that everyday wisdom, not because it stopped working, but because it stopped fitting into our story, and now we get to choose. We can continue to treat these plants as invisible, or dangerous, or irrelevant. Or we can approach them with respect, curiosity, and caution, and slowly rebuild a relationship with the living world around us. If you've watched this far, we'd love to hear from you. Does your region have a plant that everyone ignores, but your grandparents or elders swore by? A weed your family used as food, tea, or simple home remedy? Share it in the comments. Your story might be the missing piece of someone else's puzzle. If you want to keep walking through this vault of lost nature wisdom with us, exploring forgotten foods, ancient gardening techniques, and the quiet medicine of the forest and field, feel free to watch the next video we've prepared for you. We're just getting started, because the truth is, for every plant we've talked about tonight, there are dozens more hiding in plain sight. Some in the cracks of the city, some along forgotten country roads, some right now in your own backyard. We'll see you in the next episode. Until then, look down, look closer. Nature hasn't forgotten us. We're the ones who forgot how to listen.